Finally, moving to our third panel discussion, I would like to invite Mr. Abhishek Jha, senior journalist at DD News, to start this session. But I would like to say
Uh,
about Mr. Jha first. Mr. Jha has been covering the MSME sectors and has been closely observing how small businesses and related livelihood opportunities have been severely affected by the COVID crisis. So, with his expertise in this area, I would like to invite him and request him to introduce the speakers and commence the session. So, over to you.
uh, Thank you, Ruchika. Thank you very much. And I'm actually really happy to see this eminent panel of guests on our list. We'll be talking about how this whole pandemic, which has been quite unprecedented in terms of our memorable history, at least, has impacted the livelihood and the way people have been living, both in the last 1 or 2 years, how much it has actually been temporary and how much of it will be felt permanently. We'll be joined to discuss all these aspects of the issue. Professor Umakant will be here, his director IRMA, and then we'll also be joined by Deepa Gopalakrishnan. She's from Samhita Social Ventures. Also, we'll have contributing editor Monga Beg, Mr. Kundan Pandey, who will be also sharing his insights because he has been traveling on roads during the last 1.5 years to cover various of his news stories. Starting with Professor Dash, recently we have seen like almost all the sectors that one can expect, because India, we have seen smaller sectors employ more people. Maybe it's MSME sectors, agriculture sectors, sector which are like more or less unorganized. Service sector is one of them. Tourism sector is another. In almost every sector, we have seen a tremendous loss of job opportunities, which are, and most of these job opportunities has been permanent in nature. Recently, I was going through one of the United Nations report, which looks after this tourism sector across the globe. And it said that more than 90% of the industry has been wiped out. And to underline the fact that this was when the first wave has only hit, and the second wave was still going to hit. So it's been 2 years. Many industries have almost been closed. So, taking from here, how do you see the role of these NGOs and social sector entrepreneurs in chipping in where they can make a sustainable approach in ensuring the livelihood of so many people who have lost jobs and other employment opportunities can be brought about, or some modification or some innovation can be brought about, so that there can be this sustainable model of growth in their respective lives. Professor Dash, and then we'll go to Deepa Gopalakrishnan also.
Thank you very much for CSR initiative. As you have rightly pointed out, the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic has created unprecedented economic and social crisis, not only in India, across the world, as it has created tremendous negative impact on the livelihood of particularly the marginal and the vulnerable section of the society. And that's the section of the society which are less, they have the less resilience, I should say. You might have seen many people working the informal sector, they have lost their jobs and income due to the pandemic. Unemployment, poverty among the people in both urban and rural areas throughout the country has increased. And we have experienced immediately after the first lockdown, the reverse migration of millions of migrants back to villages with their heartbreaking journeys has added to the economic hardship of rural households with sudden loss in their income from remittances and other things. There are of course no concrete number, but the studies says the pandemic-induced recession has pushed close to 80-90 million more people below the poverty line in last 1.5 years, and even further away from access to health, education, gender equality, and economic participation. So that's the major challenge. And unfortunately, the success in economic growth in the last few decades could not shape poor people to become extremely poor, because economic prosperity was not inclusive to the extent it was desirable, or it is desirable. There are tons of studies report that try to identify the impacts of COVID that is imposed on the lives of marginal and vulnerable populations. The studies reported identified some of the serious limitations of the existing economic policies. Often we have recognized that the only growth-oriented policy measures are not sufficient to reconstruct the economy, even the post-COVID era. So that's the time now we have to sit down and think how all the stakeholders, government, NGOs, and other development agencies, they can come together to rescue the livelihoods or the pain and the suffering that the entire population or the vulnerable section is going through. I think now at least we have realized that neither the government or corporates or NGOs, they can work in silo because they have their own expertise. So we have to bring everybody together, and we have to come to the boardroom and start unpacking the things, not only understanding the magnitude, because it's like an elephant. So what we see is not the entire animal, but one part of it. There are social problems, there are economic problems, there are other issues which are related to this pandemic. Now we have to approach or use an integrated, in a holistic approach, I must say, to understand the issues. As my predecessor also saying, we need to, it's not that there is one solution that is available which can be thought of. We have to critically analyze the issues that the vulnerable section or the marginal sections they are going through, and how are we going to bring back to the norm, the mainstream, not only providing the basic livelihood, but giving them the access to health, to education, to basic amenities. So those are, and the mental issue, that mental health is a major challenge which most of the households are going through. Living together for more than a year and without much interaction, without having exposed to their friend circle, their peers, this is a different kind of social problem, which we never have never exposed to. So we, as now this is the time we have to come together and contribute our bit in a holistic manner, so that if of course it is going to take many months, many don't know how much time it is going to take us to come back to the normalcy. But I think this is the time we have to extend our hands to each other and support each other to make their life provide a sort of upskilling them, because the situation is going to be different now.
Yes. Thank you, Professor Dash. And we'll go across to this Gopalakrishnan to have their observation or opening remarks on the issue of livelihood amidst this whole pandemic.
Thanks, Abhishek. Well, I think I'm, I'm extremely happy to say the way the entire NGO, the nonprofit ecosystem kind of came together as a response to the pandemic. And, Samhita Social Ventures, where I come from, right at the start of the pandemic, we had the opportunity to set up a large-scale multi-stakeholder platform called Revive. And this is the platform to revive the livelihoods of, exactly the same set of people that you spoke about, Abhishek and Dr. Professor Dash, the informal sector workers, the marginalized sections. And the idea was really, how do we help people revive their livelihoods and kind of bounce back from the setback that has fallen in their lives. And Samhita, as a backbone organization, and primarily with our presence in Mumbai, we could never have accomplished the kind of reach, the kind of places, the locations, the various different cohorts and the people that we were able to reach if it was not for the kind of collaboration that we saw from within the nonprofit ecosystem, right? So these are extremely reputed organizations. I'm talking about organizations such as Pratham, Seva, Vritti, Tisar, and we've had the opportunity to work with all of these organizations. And typically, we always say, at least in the nonprofit world, that collaboration nahi hota hai. Every organization seems to operate in silos. But I think in the face of adversity, you know, we all really came together because the problem was much, much larger in scale. And, you know, if each of us really tried or even wanted to operate singly, right, I think it is a question of limited resources. It is a question of mobility, accessibility. It is just a question of the sheer, you know, the size of the problem. And each, you know, each non-profit partner really brought that kind of a strength to the table, right? Somebody had an experience in a certain location. Somebody had the strength of having worked in the microfinance space. Somebody was, you know, dealing with capacity building or, you know, access to social security. And just like Professor Dash said, right, all of these problems really emerged from the pandemic, right? So each nonprofit partner, I would say, has played a very, very big role indeed in helping us set up the Revive platform. And, you know, when you know, at the start of the pandemic, it looked like a simple case of providing relief, right? I mean, we all thought that, you know, the pandemic is going to come up in one wave and probably just, you know, cross over us, but it never was like that. You know, the first set of, even if you look at the first set of relief that was provided, many nonprofit partners never had done that, those kind of operations, right? Providing relief, you know, rallying support, reaching it to the last mile communities, you know, that kind of an outreach many nonprofit partners had never done. But, you know, it's people really built their capacities, you know, on the fly, and serviced the requirements. And, you know, once the relief part really got over, you know, we had to focus on recovery. And, you know, I'm happy to speak a little bit more about it, but I will halt here and you know, let Abhishek take over.
Of course, Ms. Gopalakrishnan, as you pointed out, that it was a temporary need with limited resources, but ever expanding requirements. And as various journalists pointed out, to special stories from various small pockets where the stories would have otherwise gone unheard, and how we saw that those media reports actually helped them getting resources and help in the right time. We are also joined by Mr. Pandey, who has been on the lookout of such stories and issues across the country. Maybe he can also share some insight as to how this whole livelihood thing across the India has been a problem in this effect of the whole COVID pandemic. Mr. Pandey.
Thank you, Abhishek, for giving me this opportunity. About pandemic, especially the COVID-19, we keep talking about like it was unprecedented. But I think it was more a sort of a equalizer. We all faced, like everyone, rich, poor, healthy, unhealthy, everybody has faced the heat of this pandemic. But certainly when it comes to the livelihood thing, I think the marginalized section was the most hit out of suffering. And that suffering cannot be understood by the number only. Because we saw people going on road like for thousands of kilometers to reach to their home. There was some psychological issues, some trauma, some desperation that cannot be understood by the number. And even authorities which were trying to estimate the loss, they were not able to figure out what is happening. I'll just give you one example. Like ILO, International Labor Organization, predicted in beginning, like there will be loss of 25 million jobs. But in December 2022, they just re-estimated it and said that only in Asia Pacific, 81 million jobs were lost. And India, like even that where everybody was talking about, like India will be the India's share will be maximum. But the share, you see, now the recent estimates say that India has seen 122 million losses of job. So that way we can, these are the numbers, the story when you go, when people are crying for the water, when people are vulnerable and nobody is there, like even government, rates. And it was not because there was no will, but there was no mood and there was no model. So what I felt, it was only because of the unorganized sector. Organized sector has certain way of telling their seeking help, but unorganized sector has no way of explaining the problem that way. So this was my thought there. Like, this is good learning. Like, we keep focusing on the vulnerability in terms of health, education, but in terms of data, in terms of making this sector organized, these are the area, if we work with the help of government, corporates, everybody, I think that will be the best learning to ensure the livelihood crisis.
Okay, thank you, Kundan. And taking cues from your observation, all three of you, two things are clearly visible. First, that the unorganized sector was the one which was hit basically very brutally in this whole pandemic thing. Other thing is that various jobs opportunities that were lost, maybe some of them are never going to come back because of the change in our the way we are going to live in the next coming years. So in this whole scenario, we have also seen the sympathies that emerged out of those crisis photos, graphs, and video footages that were actually beaming across the country from our TVs and mobiles. That actually helped to create some sort of helping and reaching out network, individual levels also. But the time has gone; those resources cannot fill the gap for a very long time. Uh, from Professor Dash, I would like to understand at what level the private sector and government sector and maybe some individual initiative also can help to sustain this momentum of making those people who have actually lost their livelihood opportunities a sustainable model of their livelihood, maybe some reskilling or some device, some mechanism that maybe you people are in know-how of these things, where we can have a sustainable growth oriented these livelihood schemes being launched from government sector or private sector also, especially when NGOs are stepping in with a lot more aggression to help people devise new ways of earning their livelihood. Professor Dash.
Yeah. I think the most important thing at this point of time, beside is ensuring their basic livelihood, is the empathy and sympathy with them. So they need empathy. That's more important for them. I think as NGOs and other development agencies or education institute, we have to reach out to them. The two things that we should concentrate and focus on is reskilling, because I think this is the time when social entrepreneurship is something which we have to give a boost, because that's the employability of the social entrepreneurship is going to be much more. And if you take the direct and indirect leverage of multiplier effect of these social entrepreneurs is very high. And second thing, I think we have to help them reskilling. Going down the line, the environment, the business environment is going to experience a change, both the formal sector as well as the informal sector. And we have to equip these people to get skilled again. That's where the skill development agencies and skill development programs, so that they are going to be reskilled to get absorbed in the newer environment, is something which we have to focus on. And second thing, we also have to see that they're not exploited. Exploitation is going to be there, but the ethical practices are being followed by the employer or the organizations that they absorb them, and basic human rights are being protected. So those are the things which we have to sensitize both the corporate and NGOs, how the human rights are protected. They are being, the exploitation is going to be minimized to the core, and ethical practices are being followed by these organizations.
Okay, of course, Professor Dash, Ms. Gopalakrishnan, one quick thing from you, that you as part of your NGOs and outreach must have seen first-hand experiences on ground, how people have been left rendered jobless without any food to even feed for themselves and their families. That phase we think is over. Pandemic is going to not be over overnight. It's going to stay for some time. So gradually we'll be able to overcome this after effect. What are the approaches that you have learned in this whole process that can actually help them create those sustainable model of employability, or some model that can work to sustain, like Professor Dash has also said, that they are not exploited, and at the same time they are also able to earn with a dignified manner. So what are the ways that you have decided or you have learned?
Absolutely, Abhishek. I think this is a very, very crucial question in the current scenario. And I think based upon Samhita and the Collective Good Foundation and our experiences of working under Revive, and here we have worked with several experts, several corporate partners, non-profit partners. The one critical gap that people felt and continue to feel is basically access to credit or access to capital. And here I'm talking about people here, who are used to live a life of dignity, right? I mean, they are not looking for charity. They are people, micro entrepreneurs, solo entrepreneurs, and when the pandemic hit, and even before that, for them access to credit has been a continuing problem. But I think at the times of the pandemic, with the current interest rates that formal financial institutions provide, 24% and 30%, it just becomes impossible for anybody who has seen a setback in her small business, right, for her to be able to revive that business itself. So, the one critical area right from the start that Revive identified was, how do we enable access to timely and affordable capital? And I think the need of the hour for all of us is really to be able to innovate, within the boundaries and within the boundaries of law and the realm that is available to us, be it the CSR laws or, the various other laws. I think innovative financing is one way for us to really address the large scale issues. And one of the examples that I can definitely give you is a very small financial instrument called a simple financial instrument called as a returnable grant that we came up with, right? A returnable grant is pretty much like a grant, but which comes with a moral obligation to return, right? So basically, I as an entrepreneur can take a very small shot in the arm kind of a working capital support, right? I could be a street vendor, and all I want to do is purchase some vegetables so that I can sell it on the streets, and I can make my daily wage, my daily income. So this 10,000 rupees becomes so critical for this woman that she is ready to repay it back in smaller sums over an extended period of time, with a very clear understanding that once she repays, this amount, this money actually helps somebody else in her community, right? So this kind of a revolving fund mechanism that we set up with, I think we have, it's very heartening to see that, even over the course of the entire 1 year of the pandemic, we worked with street vendor women, we have worked with small beauty salon operators, women who operate salons out of their house and earn probably 7,000 to 10,000 rupees a month. Tribal women farmers, I'm talking about home-based entrepreneurs, I'm talking about artisans, craftsmen. The kind of response that we have seen, the kind of need, first of all, that they have felt for this small working capital sum, and the earnestness that they have shown in terms of regularly repaying it. And the good part about a model is that about this model is that we are happy to build in the required necessity flexibilities, right? I mean, the idea is never to turn this into some kind of a commercial venture. This has a very solid social a standing, and the idea is to always provide them flexibility. So for example, through the course of the second wave, when many of our entrepreneurs put up their hands and said that they would require an extended moratorium, we were more than happy to support them this way. So I think I think as an ecosystem, the development sector, the CSR ecosystem, the need of the hour is to really be able to innovate and be able to come up with new models which can operate within the required framework.
Of course, Ms. Gopalakrishnan, from Mr. Pandey, we would like to have one small insight on, we know that NGOs and these all non-profit organizations and government also, they do claim and they actually reach out to people in distress in various corners of country. But then there are certain times we don't get to know the loopholes where actually those who are in need don't get the actual benefit or the help. Maybe Mr. Pandey can share some insight or his experience while doing some reporting or some stories as to how much of actuality is actually happening on the ground.
Abhishek, basically when you travel, like as a journalist, we are lucky to experience different kind of complete and new picture. So like if you go to Jhabua and deal with the tribals, so you face a completely different problem. And that is because of the lockdown or because of the pandemic. But when you go to Banaras, Varanasi, and there you talk to weavers, they face completely different problem. So what I realized while working or reporting for my organization, like one other than the capital, yeah, that is the most important thing, but the innovation. Because see, if government of India or any state government is planning, they will be covering the whole state or whole country. But corporates and the NGOs who are working with the small pockets, the unique problem the local mass is facing, they can only understand and they can bring that innovation. Definitely, then that can be taken forward by other players. Like I would like to give you one example from the ICICI Bank. My CSR Universe has shared that document. After the lockdown, they had done a survey and they realized there is a huge demand of mobile repairing. Like there are not sufficient mechanics there, so they help them. So just imagine, government of India cannot think about this. Okay, this is the problem. They can just provide ration, they can provide some money, but these are the unique problem only local players. And luckily, with the CSR law, corporates and NGOs are working on the ground, and they can bring these kind of solutions. That was my one unique observation.
Okay, of course, the pandemic has, of course, put an end to certain things and certain dimension of our life, but the new avenues of opportunities are also opening up. We'll have to leave our discussion on this note, and maybe in future also we'll collaborate on these issues. Thank you, Professor Das, for joining us, and thank you, Ms. Gopalakrishnan, for giving your valuable inputs, and thank you, Mr. Pandey, also for sharing your valuable ground zero reporting and your experiences. With this, we wind up this discussion, and for next panel of discussion, I will go back to Ruchika.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for your support. And I would, that was actually a very informative and resourceful panel discussion. And I believe with the knowledge that all of you have shared over here, it will actually immensely help with the development of this sector and eventually translate into sustainable solutions for the livelihood issues and challenges at hand. Again, I would like to thank all of you for gracing our conference. We enjoyed having your company, and we really appreciate you sharing your expertise and thought. And thank you, Abhishek, for wonderfully conducting the panel discussion.